on you to moderate the session, please.
Thank you very much, Murat. I am very delighted to chair this meeting, first of all, this session. It is a very significant conference I think for two reasons. First of all, we all know that the Ukraine war, Russian war have affected the international system for various respects. It ranges from economic policies to social policies and security policies. So that's why it's a very timely organization to examine the effects of Ukraine-Russia war at a very, very appropriate time. And I think it's the second reason that this conference is quite valuable is that there are, many valuable participants as speakers in these three panels, which is organized by, SETA and some other international and national organizations from Germany, Hungary, Romania, Georgia, and Serbia. So it is really a very special occasion to listen to our speakers here. Without, giving any further information about the panel, maybe we will have a discussion session at the end. So let me start with Professor Heinrich Kreft. He's going to look at Russia's aggression against Ukraine in terms of the global transformation of Europe's cooperative to a confrontational security architecture. All these, I think, evaluations would be very significant because in the first session, the speakers examined the aftermath effects of Russia-Ukraine war, but we are now going to look at what should be done to correct the international architecture. That's why Professor Kreft's evaluation would be a very good start to examine this structural issues. Please, Professor.
Thank you very much, Professor Asa, and also many thanks, Dr. Aslan, for the invitation, and good afternoon to you all from Budapest. Well, Russia's attack on Ukraine in February 22 in violation of international law has set in motion a tectonic shift in Europe's security order. Europe is moving from a cooperative to a confrontational security order. In a few weeks and months, the war has changed Europe's security policy more than many other developments since 1989, when the Berlin Wall came down, when the Iron Curtain came down. Sweden and Finland have applied for NATO membership. Germany has created a special fund to equip the Bundeswehr, the German army, adequately. The European Union is supplying weapons to Ukraine, and Denmark wants to participate in EU defense, which it hasn't done in the past. But these steps are probably only the first signs of a development towards a European security order without Russia or even decidedly against Russia. Europe is thus leaving a cooperative security order and moving towards a confrontational order. In order to be able to play a decisive role in shaping this order, Europe will have to reposition itself, above all in terms of security, but also in terms of economic policy. The aim is to be able to shape the conflict with Russia instead of having to endure it. With the war against Ukraine, Russia has said goodbye to a European security order that explicitly envisaged cooperation and coexistence, and to this end enshrined principles such as territorial integrity, peaceful conflict resolution, sovereignty, and the free choice of alliances. These principles had been enshrined first by the Soviet Union and then by the Russian Federation and other European states as well as the United States in various fundamental documents, such as the Helsinki Final Act of 1975, the Charter of Paris of 1990, and the NATO-Russia Founding Act in 1997. From the Western perspective, this order had proved its worth. It was based on the European Union, on NATO, and on the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. Today, it can be stated that Russia and the other states have had different ideas for a very long time about how security is to be achieved and according to which rules states deal with each other. At least since the mid-2000s, there have been clear signs that Russia would use confrontation and force to assert its interests in order to achieve security through power and control over other states. Where this has not been or is not possible, Russia has increased the cost of maintaining stability for others by creating strife, as evidenced by intervention in Mali, for example, or Central African Republic, as well as in Ukraine. From Russia's perspective, European structures have therefore been increasingly deficient. Moscow shared the Western states' positive assessment of the common European security only to a limited extent. The joint forums, such as the already mentioned OSCE, functioned only moderately. Security was increasingly shaped by the EU and NATO in Russia's eyes. Here, Russia had no say, let alone a veto. Instead, special formats were set up, the NATO-Russia Council or the EU-Russia talks. From Russia's perspective, Moscow did not play the role it deserved in this order, according to Moscow's own perception. Proposals to build a pan-European security order, such as those made by then interim President Dmitry Medvedev in June 2008, remained inconclusive, partly because the advantage over the OSCE was not clear to other members of NATO and the European Union. There was an increasing lack of a common value base and trust for cooperation. Most Western states did not perceive this Russian dissatisfaction with the existing structures in Europe. Russia, however, had long since abandoned the path of a cooperative peace order in Europe. Since 1991, Moscow has intervened militarily many times in the immediate neighborhood, first to stop the disintegration of its own country in Chechnya, 1994 and to 1996, but again from 1999 to 2009, or to expand its sphere of influence in Georgia, 2008, or Ukraine, starting in 2014. This was later joined by expeditionary operations in support of friendly rulers and for their own power projection. For example, in Syria, the southern neighbor country of Turkey, or in Libya with the aid of the so-called mercenaries of the Wagner mercenary group. Many Central and Eastern European states had long warned that Russia would not play by the rules and would enforce its goals militarily if necessary. But most other European states, particularly the Western European states, did not take these warnings for a long time seriously. It is true that the European Union imposed comprehensive sanctions on Russia after the annexation, well, first occupation and then annexation of Crimea in 2014, and that NATO decided to reposition and refocus on alliance defense. But well, my own country, I'm living and working in Hungary, but I'm a German. my own country, Germany, and other EU states' energy dependence on Russia remained and was even further strengthened by the now infamous Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which began in 2015, which construction began in 2015, meaning 1 year after the occupation and annexation of Crimea. It took until 2022, until this year, and apparently a Russian war of aggression, before it was impossible to ignore the fact that Russia had withdrawn from the European consensus on the peace order. From this peace order or cooperative security order, in which the Western states wanted to shape security with Russia, the European states have moved into a security disorder. The old order has collapsed, but it is not entirely clear what will come now, what will come after that. However, it is already foreseeable that the European states will have to prepare themselves for a lasting change towards a confrontational security order in Europe, in which security no longer functions with Russia, but in demarcation from or even against Russia. This confrontational dimension does not result from the will of the EU and NATO states, but from the fact that Russia has replaced the cooperative approach with one of military strength and has broken international law through its war of aggression on Ukraine. Attempts to end the conflict have so far passed the Russian government, or it obviously hopes to be able to assert its interests militarily. Moreover, given the repeated breaches of treaties and international law, Western states have little confidence in Russia's reliability. This order, the transition from the old cooperative, integrative order to the new conflict order against and in demarcation from Russia, means, in my eyes, a permanent shift, a permanent change. It's not a temporary change that will be over when there is a ceasefire, when there is a peace agreement in a couple of months. No, it will shape European security order for decades. This change also requires rethinking basic assumptions and saying goodbye to traditional approaches that, for example, my country, Germany, has relied on so far for so many years, such as Handel durch Wandel, change through trade, and conflict avoidance through interdependence. The core element of the new conflict order in Europe is that war and peace will no longer be the defining elements, but permanent conflict, probably below the threshold of open war. It is therefore necessary to overcome this binary approach. The absence of war does not mean necessarily the presence of peace. Since the Russian attack on Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea in 2014, there has been no open war in Ukraine, but there has been no peace either, as Russia has engulfed the country in a permanent conflict, played out with fake news, cyber attacks, economic pressure, and minor military clashes on the line of contact. A conflict order in Europe, therefore, means that the demarcation from Russia will not be peaceful, but it will not necessarily be traditionally warlike either. If European states want to survive in this conflict order, they will have to make comprehensive adjustments in the political, in the economic, but also defense policy spheres. Indeed, these requirements and recommendations are also reflected in the debate on European capacity to act as strategic sovereignty, the term which was coined by French President Emmanuel Macron. The finding is largely consensual. The European community of states in particular needs to invest far more in order to be able to determine its own destiny. At the same time, the war painfully reveals the limits of its own ability to act. In the core area of sovereignty, namely security and defense, Europe is dependent on the political, conventional, and nuclear contributions of the United States. For Europeans, it is therefore important to make their own political system more resilient to influence and attack. With regard to security and defense policy, it is necessary for the European states to reposition themselves in a conflict order in two respects. On the one hand, it is about the resilience of societal structures to be more resilient against cyber attacks, disinformation, or other attacks on critical infrastructure, what we have seen in, against the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines, the train services in the entire northern part of Germany was shut down for a full day by an attack on cables. On the other hand, it is about protection against traditional military threats. European democracies, populations, and territories must be better protected in this respect as well. This requires deployable armed forces that ensure that European states can enforce rules such as the inviolability of borders. At the same time, NATO particularly has already taken several decisions at special summits to protect its 30 members. At the same time, NATO has also made clear, has explicitly emphasized the defensive nature of all measures. They serve to protect allies, not to prepare them for attack. In the long term, however, NATO will have to move out of the crisis mode. NATO is still in a crisis mode and into a new formation in order to take account of the changed security situation in Europe.
Professor Heinrich, sorry to interrupt, and can I just request that you conclude a couple of minutes?
Yes.
Sorry that I just forgot to mention that we 15 minutes are allowed for each speaker.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Okay. Okay.
At the recent NATO summit in Madrid at the end of June this year, the alliance decided on a new strategic concept and a rebalancing of deterrence and defense planning, including a new rapid reaction force and greater troop presence in the Eastern Alliance area. However, implementation takes time, as always. The urgent issue now is to support Ukraine, that it is not losing the war against Russia. If Ukraine loses, Russia will not stop. In my eyes, and this is shared by many in my country, and particularly in the Eastern countries, Russia will not stop, but continue to enlarge its zone of influence at the cost of NATO, at the cost of the EU, and this, in my eyes, is unacceptable. And sorry for overstepping the time. Thank you very much for your attention.
No, Professor, you haven't exceeded too much anyway. So it has been a wonderful presentation. You know, you clearly explained why the traditional security system and how it collapsed in Europe, at least. And Russia chose another way to protect the security rather than relying on the traditionally well-established international rules. So the European countries should start from the beginning to think about how to protect the security in the new era. I am sure that, you know, there are many thoughts, but you have enlightened many significant aspects of this very significant issue. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.
As I said, I forgot to mention that every speaker have 15 minutes. So without spending too much time, I will go to another valuable speaker here. H.E. Jordan Bozhilov is going to be the second speaker, and he's going to talk about the fractured system. Is it time to rebuild international world order? That's going to be the topic of the speech. Mr. Bozhilov, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's a very timely debate because to me, we are on the verge of big changes in the international system. The previous speaker already mentioned that we will see a big reshaping of European security, which will probably last for decades. But I would say that it's not only about European security, it's about global security. And having in mind the situation, I think that there might be three different ways of further development of this international system. Of course, I have to say that due to the fact that war is still going on, that we can have different developments in this war. We can have, of course, different variants of the development of this international system. And I also want to mention, before going into details, that actually we know from the history that the basics of the international systems were built actually after the big wars. So I hope that we won't have another big war which will reshape totally the international system. But of course, even now we can say that there will be shifts. How big they will be, it is still to see. I think, there are three different options or possibilities for the development of international system. First, of course, it is kind of returning to the basics of the current security system, not only in Europe, but in general. We have well-established and functioning international organizations. We have clear principles and rules which were in the core of European and international security for decades. This principle allowed us to avoid big wars during the Cold War. But the question here is, does Russia want to return to these basics? And I'm afraid not. But the question also is, do we, mainly democratic countries, or are we ready to consider Russia as a reliable partner? Because the core of international system is not only principles, rules, but it is also about trust and verification, of course. Can we trust Russia? Remember the beginning or the period before the war started? Russia declared to every international player that it does not consider such an option. By the way, Russia, even before the war, started violating some of the international treaties. So this is a big question. Can we trust Russia or Russian leadership? So to me, returning to the basics, it is still questionable. The second opportunity or option would be kind of reorganization of the existing international system, but according to the Russian vision. And Russia already proposed different interpretation, and Russia already proposed to NATO and EU to reconsider some of the principles. For example, Russia wants to have a say on the future development of individual countries, and it's not only about Russia; it's also about already members of NATO and EU. For example, Russia wanted NATO to withdraw from newly adopted member states like Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, Czech Republic, Baltic countries, etc., etc., etc. But it's not only about these countries. Russia wants to have a say on the further developments of countries like Moldova, countries like Georgia, or Asian countries on its periphery. Is it acceptable for us? I say no. The other possibility, of course, would be to see big changes in the international system, and I would say a total reorganization or creation a parallel system of international relations and international security based on the alliance between China and Russia. Both China and Russia considers current international systems, mainly the main structures which shape this international system, as a Western based or influenced mainly by Europe and the United States. So they don't feel kind of comfortable within international system. Whether it's possible, okay, we see some signs, and it was clear, for example, during the pandemic, that China would try to take over or influence some of the structures of international systems, like World Health Organization, etc., etc., etc. So I cannot exclude that China and Russia would try to get on board many different countries around the world and to try to reshape the international security system. And here is a big question for Europe and mainly for the United States. If China is the main competitor or future competitor to United States, would be in the interest of United States mainly to push Russia into the hug of China, and to try to accumulate more forces in order to compete with the United States and Europe. So this is a question again for further development. So if we have there's three options. Maybe there are even more, and maybe there are some peculiarity within one or another option I mentioned. But we have to think about this, and we have to think what our policies should be in order again to preserve the peace, to create again the stability and predictability in the international relations. To me, of course, the best option would be returning to the existing system, because again, it is well developed, it is known, it is clear, transparent, and here I think we have to think how to bring Russia to this, how to push Russia to embrace, to comply with this. Very uneasy, an easy issue, but I think having all other options, this would be the best one. I think this is the only way to preserve peace in the world, preserve peace in Europe, and of course to have a basis for solving even Ukrainian, but also other conflicts. Thank you very much. I think I fit within my time limits.
Yes, thank you, Bozhilov. Really good timing. Thank you very much for this, and also good points about the possible future system for the new world order. I would raise some questions, but I should stop now to go to another speaker at the moment. Our next speaker would be Vlade Radulovic, and he is going to talk about regional cooperation as a response to contemporary security challenges, risks, and threats. I'm sure it will be very exciting again, because it's going to be a rather specific topic of any kind of security, which is a regional cooperation. Mr. Radulovic, please.
Thank you, Mr. Iser. First of all, distinguished colleagues, dear Professor, Your Excellencies, thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very glad to be here today with you. Dr. Aslan, thank you very much one more time. And I'm very happy to be able to address you in front of the Center for Geostrategy Research and Terrorism from Belgrade. I will try to be maybe in that time limit of 15 minutes, maybe a little bit less. But first of all, I would like to say that my speech today will be, let's say, divided on two parts. First will be about the modern warfare, because I think it's very important to speak about that. And second one, another one, will be about regional cooperation. Why? Because we are speaking about global level. I mean, about global level, about the new world order. We are speaking also about the European security structure, but also I'm pretty sure, and from my perspective, I think that we also have to speak about the regional cooperation, about the importance of the regional cooperation. In my conclusion, I will try to, let's say, to emphasize, to point out, let's say, 2 or 3 fields of possible fields of the cooperation on regional level, if you are speaking about the security issues on the first place. As I said, the modern warfare brought with it a new dimension that was conditioned by the information era and the accelerated development of the IT sector, the communications, and modern technologies as well. The result of this is reflected in the expansion of the stealth technologies, the composite materials, the fibers, development of hypersonic weapons, increased of accuracy of guided weapons, included those in the artillery segment. And there is very interesting reason why I'm using this special part of my speech. And the use of course, of drone and UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and as well drones, as well the ground unmanned platforms, loitering munition, and development and application of the systems for counter-electronic or electronic warfare. From my perspective, why I chose this segment for my first part of the speech, because regarding the Williams Lind, who established the framework of the 4th generation of modern war in 1989, I would like to refer very briefly on the 3 or 4 generation of war, because it's very important for this moment. Why? Let's say, namely, if you can say that the first generation of war was marked by French tactics of line and column, and the second generation was, let's say, was a concept known as the artillery conquers, the infantry occupies, also the British barrage fire. And in third generation of war, we can point out the German tactics of blitzkrieg, so developed by German army, but based on not just firepower and attrition, but also on speed, surprise, and mental as well, psychological moment. So I would like to say that today, in this moment, we can speak about even a 5th generation of war, but in this moment, we have actually some kind of mix between elements of all of last 3 generations in some small part, as well as the additional one new moment. New moment actually is the non-state actors, actually are the non-state actors. And also as a product of that, we have actually in this moment some kind of the some new let's say new playground I'm not speaking just about the network-centric warfare or something like that, but also we have hybrid warfare, we have fake news, we have media manipulation, we have propaganda activities, we have cyberspace. So it's something new. But if we take a look on the situation in Ukrainian battlefield, if we take a look on the Russian aggression in Ukraine, you can see that also the huge interest, of course, is on the UAVs, for example, but also we have elements of propaganda, we have elements of fake news, we have elements of the cyber threats, we have also the, I don't want to say cooperation, but we have also some kind of connections or some influence of bots or like China hackers or something like that, together with Russian, I'd say Russian aggressive politics and attacks on Ukraine in general. But also at the end, when you put all of these elements in one, let's say one pot, you can also have the situation on the battlefield. You have huge, massive use of artillery. So actually, it was the, let's say, like a symbol of second generation. So we are not just speaking about something new, about network-centric war or something like that. No, we are speaking about mix of actually of everything. So that's my idea. Because of that is to try to think, let's say, out of box, and try to think what the states can do to protect themselves on individual level as a state, what the alliance can do to protect themselves, and what actually the region can do. From perspective of Republic of Serbia, probably you know that we are conducting the policy of military neutrality. So sometimes you can hear that we are military neutral countries, but we are not. So the main goal on the foreign political area is the full membership of EU, but not NATO. But on the other side, it's very interesting that we conducted a lot of many activities in general, not just exercises, but activities with NATO countries, with EU countries, or on bilateral or on multilateral level. Regarding that, we are part of some mechanisms, such as the NATO mechanism for crisis management, or some EU battle group, for example, such as Hellbrook. So we are part of it. And on the other side, in this moment, from my perspective, we have space to improve the regional cooperation. And one of the first steps on that field, okay, I'm not speaking about the security issue in this moment, but one of the first step was, for example, the initiative of Open Balkan. I usually like to say that, especially we in Balkans, and especially the area of ex-Yugoslavia countries, we like to say that I like to say that we agree to disagree. So we have some problems, okay. We can resolve on. It's easy to resolve or not, but let's try to speak about space for cooperation. Let's try to speak about field of, let's say, mutual or common interest. Regarding that, and bear all that in mind, I would like to point it out actually three fields of future regional cooperation can be traced that can successfully respond on modern challenges, risks, and threats. Of course, bear in mind that in this moment, we are not just speaking about the armed threats, but also we are speaking about the unarmed threats. We are also speaking about the organized crime. We are also speaking about the criminality in general, socio-pathological phenomena, some accidents, technical accidents, for example. We are speaking about the floods, wildfires, earthquakes, and the like. So yes, actually, we have a lot of many common fields for cooperation. We have a lot of common interest. So regarding that, as I said, I try to mark the three different fields. Regarding that, the first field is recognition of the importance and the readiness of states to establish an, let's say, institutional framework that would establish a regional mechanism. So, as I said, I know that there is some kind of regional mechanism in European Union or in NATO, but I'm speaking from let's say some specific situation, because we are not part of the EU, we are not part of the NATO. So, establish the regional mechanisms, define let's say the rights and obligations between members or of members, and all other necessary issues. I mean, it's the question for institution, and as I said, it's about the readiness of institution. But there is one interesting moment from my perspective. It's the great role and position of the academic community, of the universities, of the professional association, as well as think tank organization through their let's say policy proposals or policy papers, about the recommendations, some guidelines or case studies or something, to show the importance of the regional cooperation, to show on which kind of the fields. The second field of the cooperation, and in my focus especially, is actually cooperation in the education area. So not just about the students. I'm speaking in this moment about also the staff education. I'm also speaking about the periodic organization of seminars, training, courses, as well as the joint exercises on the field between countries. The third levels, the last one, involves the participation in joint projects in the defense industry segment. From my perspective, why is important? Because, namely, in addition to the fact that this approach would enable the further economic empowerment of the countries participating in program, of course, because they can share the benefits of that projects, I mean, of sale of projects on the world market. And it will also provide opportunity for countries to strengthen their capacities and resources by purchasing products and systems from their own country or partner countries. All three mentioned fields can be particularly important for less developed, of course, countries. I mean, I would like to say countries with limited budget, let's say, and which will only jointly successful respond to the challenges of modern security environment. So that's actually that was my idea, to try to divide this on two parts. But I'm pretty sure that there is the huge connections between two of them, and that actually to conclude with this three field of possible cooperation in future. So common cooperation on the educational level, cooperation in defense level, and of course the institutional level as a base of everything. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Radulovic. As I expected, really interesting presentation, not only about the regional cooperation, but also the changing nature of warfare in our time. I am sure it will be very interesting in the following days. After the Russia-Ukraine war, many traditional ways are questioned at the moment. And thank you very much again. So we are actually going to our last speaker, Dr. Murat Aslan. He's going to talk about the visualization of conflicts and modern times. And we will have a discussion session after our last speaker, Dr. Aslan, concludes his presentation. Please, Dr. Aslan.
Thank you, Professor. Well, I'm a former soldier, so I appropriately selected conflicts And I have classes in the university mainly on conflicts though. The motivating factor on me was the questions directed either by media or students or academics for the last 1 year, if there could be any further global scale conflict at hand. So upon this theme, I think we should first describe exactly what the conflict is. Well, just a reminder, I mean, we will not reinvent the concept though. Conflict is a sort of incompatibility over something, and mainly sovereignty or territory. And the basic feature of the conflict is the quest to build superiority or counter any superiority at the expense of the other, with words or deeds through tangible or intangible means. Actually, this description is just an obstruction of mine. I mean, not in a single book, but I have just gathered differing meanings, differing definitions or conceptualization of conflict and just abstracted it. In this sense, the characteristics of conflicts are not steady. Predictable though, the momentum of means, scope, and modus operandi is usually far from imagination, with increasing level of destructiveness. And Russian aggression in Ukraine mobilized the debates on the landscape of conflicts per the priorities and concerns of the relevant audience, media, soldiers, academics, politics, etc. In this sense, the basic question of modern times has been the probability of a wide-scale conflict, probably after the Russian aggression on Ukraine. This concern recalls the appalling scenarios under the strain of weapons of precise mass destruction, mainly of nuclear arsenals. The inevitability of the sense to achieve a fast and unquestionable victory runs the decision-making processes to weigh the exploitation of these capabilities. Then the burden of the modern conflicts will be similar to the world wars, though the difference will be the impossibility of mending the destruction exposed to human civilization. Such a reality frequented the question of whether a global scale war is imminent or not. And I would like to remind one thing: it's not only about the survivability of the humankind or the earth, but also the interests of the countries in terms of losing or winning in the environment of conflict, maybe through trade, economy, business, etc. Well, what has been witnessed after the Cold War was the low-profile conflicts with new descriptions per the parties involved or methods exploited. In this sense, the lessons learned from the conflicts of the 1990s and the US interventionism after 9/11 in Afghanistan or Iraq brought two important brands of conflicts, which were peace operations and the global war on terror, respectively. Nevertheless, these military options, mainly in Afghanistan and Iraq, were irrecoverably a burden in terms of costs on societies and economies. Specifically, the Syria and the Libya crisis urged the globally and regionally dominating state actors to benefit from the hybrid and asymmetric warfare through proxy actors and or privatized military formations. The aggression of Russia in Ukraine ignited another debate, I believe, on what sort of conflict would erupt after the threat perceptions were provoked by existing conventional warfare and circulated nuclear threats. The essential questions in the minds of the public, global public, of many countries actually, are if there could be an expanding scale of conflict and with what features and under the strain of economic recession and under the conditions of potential natural disasters. As you may know, the spillover effect of the functionalist theory of international politics is a concept of positive emotion that expands a cooperative attitude to the other sections of the interactions. As a negative interpretation of this conceptualization, well, conflicts may be repeating itself by enlarged quantities and qualities to resolve the long-lasting incompatibilities. Besides, the witnessed further conflict could not directly be linked to the igniting situation. In this sense, Russian aggression does have the potential to agitate the revisionist actors with its model in relevance to obtained success and collective reaction of international community. Hence, a mode of conflict behavior can easily transform itself into an emerging norm to achieve the interests. Visiting the cases of the current era, the frozen situations like the Korean Peninsula, Iranian aggression on Azerbaijan for the last 1 year, and the Greek military mobilization and show of force with counter moves of Turkey displays fragility, threatening peace and order after the World War II. Given the fact that the number of military-based undertakings increased its posture and there occurred an environment with potentialities to be exploited. The war in Ukraine has channeled the perception of conflicts into an integrated characteristics. The conflicts of today will be a mixture of conventional and unconventional, symmetric and asymmetric, hybrid and proxies with an ally of differing conflict brands. Russian conventional threats and the act of special operation, actually war, pushed the European and the American militaries to revisit the old doctrines to be prepared for a conventional war, since they had seen the old T-62s tanks of the Cold War stuck across the roads in Ukraine. The military drills, which were basically projecting an irregular and hybrid enemy in scenarios after the Cold War, lined the conventional order of battle under the conditions of unconventional, that means nuclear, biological, chemical, or radiation, operational environment after Russian threats. The proxies and the hybrid force nature of the state's hard power applications are still designed to complement the militaries to lessen the burden of conflict, right after recalling this conventionality and unconventionality. Recalling the last 3 decades, the armies of the developed countries suffered from incompatibility in adapting themselves to peace operations and counter-terrorism missions in the 1990s and 2000s. It was a reality. And the required transformation of the military was a tough task for the general staffs to build an appropriate doctrine, order of battle, personnel qualifications, or required equipments to counter the threats. And it was designed or defined as ambiguity at that time. In other words, the militaries, with the exception of underdeveloped and developing countries, had eradicated the scenarios of conventionalism and unconventional warfare. The state actors with the least capable of challenging their traditional adversaries were, and still is, experiencing a very conventional posture of military readiness. On the other hand, asymmetry has been the preferred modus operandi in challenging rather powerful competitors by exploiting the opportunities of globalization. And in this sense, cyber warfare is a significant cause for the weaker, while the economic devastation narrative, for instance, of Trump, the former president of the United States, was the apparatus of the stronger. Given the impact of Afro discussion, the states are now being prepared for what I name is super combat. The super combat environment, which is the combination of old and newly emerging war doctrines, weaponry, equipment, and methods that will be more prevalent. Under the conditions of a super combat brand, the probability of outraging conflicts is a matter of concern. The states are usually isolating the conflicts in the area of operations of the combatants. Apparently, Ukraine receives the military support of the West, and Russia perceives this threat as a direct threat to justify its limited use of asymmetric power. Then Eastern Europe and the Baltics became an extended area of the covert military campaign as a fresh beginning to a more direct confrontation. Meanwhile, there may be state or non-state actors which perceive the vulnerabilities as an opportunity to dictate their agendas, like terror networks or irregular groups. Well, the projection may point out many conflicts across the different regions in the meantime. Iran's threat to Azerbaijan and military drills in the vicinity of the border confirmed this perception. The incompatibilities in Asia, Taiwan, the Korean Peninsula, and a potential Russia and Japan case upon the Kuril Islands, India and Pakistan, etc., they all may present a scattered conflict series. Africa, with inter and intra-state issues in question, might be the geography of indirect confrontation between the dominating powers like China, France, Russia, or the USA. The Middle East, on the other hand, other than the opportunistic rentier states of the Middle East and the wider region, remains a bomb ready to exploit. Then there can be fractured regional and intra-communal conflict types that could provoke the combination of old and new sorts of conflicts. Given the fact that the UN is short of responding to the incompatibilities, the peace operations cannot address the internal conflicts anymore, while super combats, more than the traditional but less than the total wars, can cause catastrophes through numerous pervasive conflicts that could breed each other. Furthermore, the COVID pandemic could not stop the continuing conflicts in the 2020s that environmental degradation and climate change will most probably multiply the effects of this new type of combats. Finally, the approaching global economic winter will fasten the process of such super combats unless the states combine their economic capacities, maybe through a financial NATO, to suppress the most destructive combat brand, which is economic collapse. Thank you so much for your patience and waiting questions in the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Aslan. You have underlined the striking aspects of the modern conflicts. All these you have said quite enlightening. Now we have concluded the first part of our panel. So our speakers have completed their presentations. I will just devote some time, because we have some time in the second part in the discussion session, I will devote some time for the discussion, question and answers. I have myself prepared what I call some, underlying questions to our each speakers, starting with Professor Heinrich. Can I just raise that question? What would or should be the fundamentals of the new security system, as you explained very well, that like Germany thought, the interdependence did not really play the expected role to prevent the actual conflicts between the countries. That's why, and for many other reasons, we need another security system. In your perception, what kind of fundamental elements we should observe for a new security system?
Yeah, well, thank you for this question. There are different aspects on it. there's of course, you mentioned the dependencies which have existed and which were way too strong in comparison to the risks involved. And this is particularly true for my country and some other neighboring countries like Austria, and also mainly all Eastern European countries are very dependent on energy imports from Russia, and only Poland and the Baltics have made some efforts in the past couple of years to get independent. Poland has constructed a gas pipeline from Norway to Poland. Poland and Lithuania have established LNG terminals in order to tap into LNG imports, and this way to become less dependent on Russia. This is not the case, for example, in the country where I'm residing. Hungary is very dependent, and my colleague from Bulgaria probably will be able much better to talk about the dependency of Bulgaria on gas from Russia. So to become less dependent on Russia is a must. And the second thing is, of course, which was also mentioned, we should not only think in military terms, but also to make our societies in general more resilient. For example, the best thing to fight fake news is to better educate our people, our youngsters, but also elder people, to be able to differentiate fake news from real news, from true news. So it has to we need a comprehensive approach to bolster European security vis-a-vis Russia. And this will be necessary for the next couple of decades. And as my succeeding speaker from Bulgaria said, the trust is gone. The trust is lost. And one thing which is very difficult to recuperate is trust. We need a lot of time. We need many years in order to trust the agreements which well, eventually we will have to come to agreements with Russia to end this situation. But we should not become again as dependent on Russia as we have been in the past. But this is also not to forget NATO. NATO is and will remain the bulwark of European security, particularly vis-a-vis the East. In the past, we thought, well, the threats will come from different sources. For example, Germany didn't have any defense anymore against bombers. So anti-aircraft tanks, those ones we gave to Ukraine. They were not in service anymore in Germany because we are surrounded by NATO members. So we thought, well, who should attack us? And so the situation has proven us wrong. There is a threat. There is a threat coming from the sky. So we have to invest in all areas to become more resilient.
Okay. A quick question, Professor Heinrich. Are we too quick to lose the confidence or trust in Russia? It could be like an administration's fault, demolishing this traditional international system rather than the people of Russia. Could you say a couple of things about that? Are we too fast to lose the trust in Russia?
Too fast, you mean?
Too fast to lose the trust in Russia, considering that it could be the fault of, let's say, administration rather than the people of Russia.
Yeah, well, of course, we have to make a difference between the administration and the people of Russia. And the people of Russia are suffering a lot because of this war, particularly those families whose sons are actually fighting this war, but also all the others are suffering from the sanctions. Many say the sanctions are not working. They will work. They will work in the longer run, and it will be a big setback for the Russian economy, and this means for the Russian people. But I would not say that this is Putin's war. It's the entire system. It's all the governmental institutions, and we should not forget that Putin is still very popular in Russia, and that he gets a lot of support for what he calls special operation. Well, we know this is due to also to fake news, but fake news doesn't explain the entire support of this. And of course, geographically, Russia will always be a part of Europe. So we will have to live with with Russia. And my point is this confrontational situation will not go away in a few years. It will last maybe 2 decades, 3 decades, hopefully less. But it would be ahistoric not to think that relations could be repaired with Russia.
In a short time.
It's a question of time, and it will not be possible in a short time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Professor Ahmet Keser has a question. So let me give the floor to Professor Keser.
Thank you, Professor. If I may, I will ask a question to Professor Heinrich Kreft as well, concerning the visit paid by Chancellor Olaf Scholz to China. So in this kind of changing relations within the international relations arena and the global order, how do you evaluate this visit given to China? Because we are talking that Germany is trying to save herself from a dependence from the Russian forces. On the other hand, strengthening the relations with China on the economic basis, will it be another problem for the dependency of Germany to another power, which doubtfully all the other countries are reaching to their policies under the authoritarian regime now? How do you evaluate that? And what is the impact of Russian-Ukrainian conflict on that issue?
Yeah, well, very good question, Professor Keser. And we had a huge debate in Germany, even within the coalition. So our foreign minister, Mrs. Baerbock, she was in Central Asia, and actually something unheard of. She criticized her own chancellor, who was going to go to China. So this shows that this was a huge debate, and is still a huge debate in Germany. But it shows the pragmatic position of Chancellor Scholz. Germany and Europe in total will never be self-sufficient. Never be self-sufficient in energy, never be self-sufficient in raw materials. So we have to be an exporting country in order to be able to finance our imports, and we need imports. So to get dependent, to get independent from Russia and to get too much dependent from another country is, of course, not the solution. But the solution is diversification as much as possible. And it's absolutely true. If we look at specific branches of the German economy, the car industry is way too dependent on China. And also the chemical industry, BASF and others are way too dependent on China. I think this will change. This will also change because the economy in China is changing. Some say that China is peaking this year. And well, this is at least true in two aspects. From this year on, the Chinese population is not growing anymore, but it's decreasing. And for the very first time in many, many, many years, the Chinese economy is growing less fast than many of its neighbors. And this, of course, has to do, of course, with the zero COVID policy of Xi Jinping, but it also has to do with many restrictions, particularly on private businesses, on the IT companies, which were the driver of many parts of the Chinese economy and stood for a substantial part of growth. So I think German companies will also look to other countries, will look to India, will look to Southeast Asia, but also will look closer to home. So instead of offshoring, nearshoring, or some call it friendshoring, it makes sense to invest closer to home because it makes the lines of logistics less vulnerable. We have seen when this container ship stranded in the Suez Canal, I don't know, a couple of hundred ships were queuing up, and we saw the effects here in Hungary with the car industries because parts were missing from China. So they are all vulnerable. But also touching your question on Ukraine, Russia, China. Well, China has a very specific position, of course, and it has not criticized China as much as we had hoped for. But if we look at what really happened on the ground, and it's happening on the ground, Russia doesn't get that much from China, of course, not in the military field, but also not in other fields. This has partly to do with sanctions of the West, because even for Chinese companies, the American market, the European market is more important than the Russian market will ever be. And a very good outcome of, and I will end with this, of the visit of Chancellor Scholz was that the two, Xi Jinping and Scholz, made a point that playing with nuclear threats is playing with the destiny of mankind on this earth. And I think this was a very valuable outcome of that visit. As I said, the reason for the visit was very much contested, even in Germany. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Heinrich. I think Mr. Bozhilov had to leave a bit earlier, so I should just skip the question that I prepared for himself. So, Mr. Radulovic, you mentioned the new means of warring, and you described it as a rather mixture of traditional and modern elements. Could you name the sanctions in our time as a very effective and new means of warring? Do you think that the sanctions, economic and commercial sanctions, are very powerful elements of warring in our time?
Well, it's interesting question, and I think actually at the beginning that I can agree with you, but there is, I would like to say there is another question. Do you have alternative? What do you mean? If you take a look on Moscow, for example, when they started brutal aggression on Ukraine on 24th of February, they actually, it's from my perspective, they actually earlier they made some kind of alternative. What they mean? Alternative with Beijing, alternative if you are speaking about markets, about the economy issues, etc., with Tehran also, etc. Improvement for this actually is that we have in this moment the drones, loitering munition from Iran at the Ukrainian battlefield, and Russians using it. We have actually at least 2 types of UAVs, Iranian UAVs in confirmed. I'm speaking about the confirmed platforms in Ukrainian battlefield used by Russians. About the energy sector, they also trying to actually play. I mean, I'm speaking about Russia. If we are speaking about the current situation, they have to find alternative for their resources. I mean, the gas and actually the oil and natural gas, as well as the second field actually is second mechanism is to use the energy argument to put the pressure on the government or fully or totally dependent countries of natural gas or on oil. So if you ask me, it could be one of very successful argument, a section, but the point is, do we have or do they have alternative? If they have alternative, we can discuss about the success of that instrument. Let's say, in this moment, for example, from my perspective, Russians they have some problems, for example, with the microchips or something like that, because of sanctions. They don't have a new, let's say, the new generation. I would like to say parts in general, microchips, etc., from the West, and they have a problem. On the other side, on some field of, as I said, for example, of energy or something, and that's the actually reason some of colleagues mentioned the tanks T-62. I think Dr. Aslan, but I'm not sure. That's the reason why in this last more than 8 months, actually, on the Ukrainian battlefield, we can see just the old type of tanks. I mean, mainly T-55, 62, 72, B1 to B3, doesn't matter, different kind of modernization, etc. But actually, it's not possible to see new Kurganets. It's not possible to see some new projects such as Armata or something like that. Maybe is it the answer on that question is the problems with Mr. Rogozin and his current position. So that's the problem. If you have in plan to use the sanction in different kind of fields, so economic energy fields or diplomatic field, it doesn't matter. Or yes, they can produce some kind. You can gain some results. It could produce some results. But the main question is, what about alternative? For example, and I will conclude in this moment. We had a couple of weeks ago the Shanghai session, let's say, Shanghai Organization for Cooperation. And actually, the result was even, we can say that there is huge connections between Beijing and Moscow. For example, we saw some kind of little bit different statement of President Xi Jinping and very interesting criticized statement of Prime Minister Modi of India, Prime Minister of India. So if you want to try to provide for yourself some kind of alternative, if you want to fight against the sanction, for example, you have to, let's say, to be sure that your alternative will works. If we are thinking about alternatives such as, for example, Caucasian countries or something like that, I'm pretty sure that on long term, Russians could be in problem. Maybe in short term, maybe someone expects much more results, effects, for example. But I'm pretty sure that actually that idea about the sanctions and actually tool of sanctions in XY, doesn't matter countries, it's not just about Russia, but in XY, it's actually the long-term race, and the main question is actually what about alternative? If you can stop, let's say stop the alternatives, actually it could be very, very useful tool.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, sanctions are quite, puzzling because in the long term it may also contribute to the deeper division among the states. So global divisions or maybe new kind of Cold War is possible because of these sanctions, although they seem to be necessary, but also they have some side effects. We should accept it. Okay. Our last question to our last speaker, Dr. Murat Aslan. He, described the modern conflicts and its striking aspects. This question is also significant, which is discussed in our time now after the Russia-Ukraine war. Is it widespread? Or is a widespread conflict possible globally? I mean, sometimes we talk about Third World War, and sometimes we talk about the nuclear war as a global, conflict. Is it really possible? And if the answer is yes, what kind of global conflict would be possible?
In the just beginning of my proceeding, I had said the same thing. I mean, this is the question mostly frequented. Well, what I believe is that I think you can't say yes or no to such sort of questions, but you can just try to predict, especially not the percentage, but probability with certain degrees. Well, right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the incapacity of Russians for a while, and the ongoing integration efforts of the Europeans, and the new sorts of conflicts of then, like multi-ethnicism, internal turmoils, well, it just brought the potentials to the lowest level, even though underdeveloped and developed countries did have this probability in accordance with their capacities and intentions. Today, Russia, mainly Putin, I believe, perceived themselves as something capable to start a military campaign, and they did it. And if they have an intention integrated with this capacity, well, they started it. Well, the endurability of a conflict with the existing capability, on the other hand, they forgot something. It was the commitment of the public. There were protests. The number of flees from the army after the partial mobilization, it's another issue that we can't measure by numbers, I believe. But today, I think not the Russian intention or capacity, but the reflections, outcomes are really important. Today, there are some countries or non-state actors, not only the countries, they are a bit insistent on resolving long-standing conflicts or frozen conflicts in their area of interests. One case was Iran. Once something happens in Iran as an internal matter, well, finding an external threat is not that much difficult because you have a lot of problems frozen. On the other hand, the risks in the geopolitical landscape, like an integrated Turkic state organization, and today they have a summit in Uzbekistan, well, it's a great challenge to Iran. Then what happens? Iran, with a conventional power augmented by long-range missiles and other capacities like the UAVs that are witnessed in Ukraine, it's not that much difficult right now. Well, a misunderstanding, a miscalculation within the mentality of neorealism, well, they can start something. But, you know, in the current age, when you step up to a conflict, either with your own decision or pushed, you can't step back. Because it's not something to say, I changed my mind. You may say it, but the concerns like public reaction or discredited image of the state, etc. I mean, these are the things that states cannot, or non-state actors cannot, you know, pledge. So in my opinion, a wide-scale conflict in the coming years, it may be or may not be, but my projection is that we may witness isolated conflicts in every differing regional system that could feed a sort of, you know, agenda of any individual state that perceives itself as capable with an intention. And just please remember what happened period to the world wars. There were wars among the states. They were not cumulative. They were first individual, then spread to the other countries. And mobilizing the country was a clear threat, was perceived as a clear threat, for instance, by the UK at that time, taking the German case to the epicenter. So that's why what I expect, if Russia continues this war with no agreement with Ukraine, it may encourage revisionists in every single regional system just to realize an ultimate goal. If there is no collective response of international community, I do not mean only the Western Hemisphere, because for me, international community covers the overall globe, then these regional conflicts does have the potentiality to spread and integrate each other just to have more challenging, you know, military deterrence on the other side. So I think I could present my ideas because it's something very in between conspiracy theories, predictions, and also realities.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Aslan. As you say, we may think about a global war or not, but as you say, there are unfortunately many isolated conflicts around the world. The system unfortunately allows that such isolated conflicts around the world exist, unfortunately. Let's just hope that it may not turn into a global conflict. Okay, I think there is another question. We can say the last question, please.
Very last questions, if
okay.
It's possible.
Okay.
So my name is David Kapanadze from Georgian Strategic Analysis Center. And first of all, thank you for organizers such a very, very interesting and comprehensive conference. And my questions also goes to Professor Heinrich Kreft, who very, very comprehensively described the situation. And he also touched energy issues. And the winter is approaching actually, and Europe is experiencing the certain problems in terms of energy supply. Another hand, we have the Caspian Sea and littoral countries with enormous energy sources like Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. I also would like to remind you that in July, the high official from the European Union, Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, visited Baku, and she signed a memorandum with President Aliyev. And my question is, what is the future strategy of the European Union in terms to receive gas from Caspian Sea through South Caucasus, Turkey, etc., etc.? And what is the perspectives from Germany, from Hungary, and from other countries as well? If you could elaborate a little bit this. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for this question. Well, it was a big mistake not to build Nabucco, the Nabucco pipeline. So there have been already plans to bring in gas and oil particularly gas from Caspian region, and this was the wrong decision to build instead the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which we had already Nord Stream 1. We had all the traditional pipelines via Ukraine, via Belarus and Poland, bringing piped gas from Russia to Germany. So it would have made sense to build another pipeline which doesn't touch Russian territory, but well, for economic reasons mainly, it was decided to build Nord Stream 2 instead of Nabucco. And I remember my former, I'm a German diplomat. My former foreign minister, Joschka Fischer, he was actually working for the Nabucco consortium, but actually he couldn't make a difference. So what the visit of Mrs. von der Leyen, the president of the Commission, shows that Europe has second thoughts now. So we have to become independent from Russian gas, and this includes to tap into gas reserves wherever we can get it. So it's LNG from the US, it's LNG from Qatar, it's piped gas from Algeria, but it's also gas from the Caspian region. But the Caspian region alone will not be able to serve the entire necessity of gas Europe needs. But you're absolutely right. Europe, particularly Germany, has second thoughts about bringing also gas from the Southern Caucasus, from the Caspian region to Europe.
Okay, thank you, Professor Heinrich. I think we have just come to the end of our panel. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Although the discussions are quite, informative and interesting, we have to stop here because there is another panel following this session. And thank you very much for our panelists and for these very enlightening observations and thoughts. And as we have said at the very beginning, that's a very timely conference on global security. I am sure that it will produce a very fruitful results. And thank you also to the organizing institutions. Best regards to all. Thank you for your participation.
So, sir, the Zoom, well, it's active. You can leave, you can mute, you can, whatever. It's on your